There are moments in history when the entire architecture of geopolitical power shifts, not over years, not over months, but over the span of a single week. We may be living through one of those moments right now. Sometime in the early morning hours, while most Americans were asleep, 7 separate waves of Iranian ballistic missiles lit up the skies over Israel. 7 barrages in a single night. Interceptors soared through the darkness above Tel Aviv, above Jerusalem, above the West Bank, racing to meet incoming fire at breathtaking speed. And not all of them made it in time. At least 4 people were killed. 3 of them were Palestinian women who, according to field reports, were inside a salon when the missile fire began, an image that captures in devastating and heartbreaking detail the true civilian cost of warfare that has no regard for the innocent. A worker in central Israel was killed by cluster munitions raining down from the sky. And in one of the most symbolically jarring moments of this entire escalating conflict, a large piece of Iranian missile shrapnel landed just feet from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in the heart of Jerusalem, one of the most sacred sites on earth, venerated by hundreds of millions of Christians worldwide. Authorities responding to that scene described fragments of a weapon of war lying on ancient stone streets that have witnessed 2,000 years of human history. The holy city, no stranger to conflict across the centuries, found itself once again in the crosshairs of modern military aggression. This is not a localized skirmish. This is not a contained exchange of fire between 2 adversaries. What is unfolding across the Middle East right now is a rapidly escalating conflict with the very real potential to reshape global energy markets, redraw regional alliances, and force nations from the Persian Gulf to the capitals of Europe and Asia to make decisions they have been deliberately avoiding for years. Tonight we break down every dimension of this developing story: the battlefield, the diplomacy, the economic shockwaves, the intelligence community's assessment of what comes next, and the 6 American heroes who gave their lives in service to this nation during one of the most complex military operations in recent American history. The headline stated plainly and soberly: the conflict between Israel, Iran, and the United States military, operating under the designation Operation Epic Fury, has entered a dangerous new phase. Iranian forces, even as their leadership structure continues to be systematically targeted and degraded, launched 7 successive waves of ballistic missiles at Israel overnight. Simultaneously, Iran escalated its reach in a way analysts are calling the most significant single act of regional aggression in the current conflict, targeting the North Field, the largest liquefied natural gas facility in the entire world, located off the coast of Qatar. That strike sent European natural gas prices surging by 30% in a matter of hours. Iran also struck oil and gas infrastructure in the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait, and fired ballistic missiles at Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia, a nation that had, until that point, been watching this conflict from a deliberate and cautious distance. All of this unfolded as the Pentagon prepared to hold a major news conference to brief the American public on the progress of Operation Epic Fury, and as CENTCOM United States Central Command released new video footage highlighting the devastating firepower being deployed by the United States military in this theater. To fully understand the magnitude of what is happening, it is necessary to walk through each layer of this story with the detail and context it demands. Let's begin with the human cost closest to home for Americans. President Donald Trump recently paid his formal respects to 6 United States service members who were killed when a military refueling aircraft crashed over Iraq. These were not statistics, these were Americans, men and women who signed their names to a contract with their country and paid the ultimate price. Their names deserve to be spoken clearly and with the full weight of remembrance. Major John Alec Kilner, from the state of Alabama, a senior officer whose rank speaks to years of dedicated military service; Captain Ariana Savino, from Washington State, a commissioned officer whose presence in a war zone reflects both her personal courage and the increasingly complex roles women now serve in the United States Armed Forces; Ashley Pruitt, from the Commonwealth of Kentucky; Captain Seth Coball, from Indiana, another commissioned officer serving in one of the most volatile regions on the planet; Captain Curtis Angst from Ohio and Tyler Simmons, also from Ohio, two sons of the Buckeye State who will be mourned in the communities that raised them. 6 Americans, 6 families shattered, 6 communities left to process a grief that no press briefing can adequately address. President Trump's act of paying his personal respects to these fallen service members represents one of the most solemn duties of any commander-in-chief, and their sacrifice frames the human stakes of this operation in a way that no number of satellite images or intelligence reports ever could. Now let us turn to the battlefield picture in detail. Fox News correspondent Trey Yingst, reporting live from Tel Aviv, Israel, described a scene of sustained aerial bombardment, unlike anything seen in recent weeks. Beginning at midnight, 7 distinct barrages of Iranian ballistic missiles were launched in the direction of Israeli territory. Israel's layered air defense systems, which the Israeli military's own spokesperson described as, quote, among the best in the world, were activated to intercept the incoming fire. And while many of those interceptors performed exactly as designed, streaking through the night sky in visible arcs above populated areas, the spokesperson acknowledged what military experts have long cautioned, that no air defense system is completely airtight. Some of the incoming fire got through, impact sites were recorded across multiple locations, and critically, the Iranians deployed cluster munitions, a category of weaponry that disperses submunitions over a wide area, exponentially increasing the danger to civilians in densely populated zones. The Israeli military spokesperson addressed this directly and forcefully, stating that the use of cluster munitions against population centers constitutes, in the spokesperson's own words, a war crime, comparing the weapon's destructive dispersal pattern to a conventional missile, but with even broader and more indiscriminate reach. The scene near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem deserves particular attention, both for its physical danger and its symbolic weight. Jerusalem's police spokesperson, speaking through a translator, confirmed that shrapnel and large fragments from an Iranian missile fell over the city following the overnight operation. The Homefront Command, Israel's civilian emergency authority, had issued directives to close holy sites as a precautionary measure, a decision the spokesperson described as having already proven to be a life-saving one. The imagery of missile debris lying adjacent to one of the most visited religious landmarks in the world sends a message that extends far beyond the immediate military conflict. It speaks to the breadth of Iran's willingness to strike at the very heart of one of the world's most historically and religiously significant cities. Meanwhile, as the skies above Israel were illuminated by interceptors and incoming fire, a development of potentially even greater long-term consequence was unfolding across the waters of the Persian Gulf. Israel launched a massive strike on the North Field, a gas reserve of staggering global importance. This facility, located off the coast of Qatar, is shared between Qatar and Iran, and it represents the single largest deposit of liquefied natural gas in the world. Qatar's gas supply chains serve energy consumers across Europe, Asia, and beyond. The facility is not simply an energy asset, it is a foundational pillar of global energy security. When 3 fires broke out at that facility following the Israeli strike, the reverberations were felt immediately and globally. European natural gas prices shot up 30%. As Fox News correspondent Lucas Tomlinson reported live from Dubai, as of approximately 8 hours after the initial strikes, first responders in Qatar had managed to bring 2 of the 3 fires under control, but the third remained burning. The full economic and logistical damage to the facility and to Qatar's liquefied natural gas export capacity has not yet been fully assessed. President Trump responded to the news of the gas field strike with a post on Truth Social that was notable for the precision of its diplomatic messaging. The president stated clearly that the United States had no advance knowledge of the Israeli strike on this particular facility, and that Qatar, a Gulf nation that hosts the United States' largest military base in the Middle East, Al Udeid Air Base, was in no way, shape, or form involved with or aware of what was going to happen. The president then issued a direct warning that no further Israeli strikes would be conducted on that gas field unless Iran were to unwisely choose to attack Qatar itself. It was a statement designed simultaneously to reassure a critical American ally in the Gulf, to restrain a further escalation of the energy infrastructure conflict, and to place the responsibility for any future escalation squarely on Tehran's shoulders. The diplomatic precision of that statement reflects just how delicate and intertwined the relationships in this region have become. Iran's response to the Israeli strike on the gas field was sweeping, and in the words of regional analysts, represented the single largest escalation of the entire conflict. Iranian forces did not merely retaliate against Israel. They launched ballistic missiles at Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. They struck oil and gas fields in the United Arab Emirates. They targeted energy infrastructure in Kuwait. As Tomlinson reported, drone activity from Iran has increased significantly in recent days, even as overall missile attack rates have fluctuated. The cumulative effect is a campaign targeting the energy infrastructure of multiple Gulf nations simultaneously, nations that critically have not been direct participants in the Israeli-Iranian exchange. Saudi Arabia's response was immediate and striking in its bluntness. The Prince of Saudi Arabia issued a statement declaring that whatever limited trust had previously existed had now been completely shattered, on promising that Saudi Arabia would use every lever at its disposal, political, economic, diplomatic, and otherwise, to bring these attacks to a halt. That statement, combined with the reality that missiles now have struck Saudi, Emirati, and Kuwaiti territory, has forced the Gulf Cooperation Council states into a set of decisions they had been actively working to avoid. To place this moment in proper historical context, it is worth reflecting on the arc of United States-Iranian relations over the past nearly half-century. Since the Iranian Revolution of 1979, when the government of Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi was overthrown and replaced by an Islamic theocratic regime under Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, the United States and Iran have existed in a state of sustained and at times explosive hostility. The seizure of the American embassy in Tehran in November of 1979, the 444-day hostage crisis that followed, and the catastrophic failed rescue attempt known as Operation Eagle Claw in 1980 established a baseline of distrust and strategic antagonism that has colored every subsequent interaction between the two countries. Throughout the 1980s, Iran and the United States engaged in an undeclared naval conflict in the Persian Gulf during the Iran-Iraq War. The 1990s and 2000s saw repeated cycles of sanctions, covert operations, and proxy confrontations, with Iran expanding its network of regional proxy forces, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, and various Shia militia groups operating in Iraq and Syria as its primary tool of regional power projection. The nuclear dimension of this conflict has roots stretching back decades but became critically acute over the past 12 years as Iran's uranium enrichment program progressed to levels that multiple intelligence assessments concluded brought Tehran to the threshold of weapons-grade capability. The Obama administration's 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear deal, represented an attempt to trade sanctions relief for enrichment limitations, a deal that the first Trump administration withdrew from in 2018, reimposing sweeping sanctions that severely damaged the Iranian economy. The subsequent Biden administration's efforts to negotiate a return to the agreement collapsed without a final deal being reached. By the time the current conflict ignited, Iran's nuclear infrastructure had been a target of both covert sabotage, including the 2010 Stuxnet cyber attack widely attributed to the United States and Israel, and overt military strikes. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard testified before the United States Senate that the intelligence community's assessment was that Iran's nuclear sites had been struck in 2025, dealing a significant blow to Tehran's ability to reconstitute that program in the near term. The combination of nuclear infrastructure degradation, systematic elimination of top leadership, and now the sustained conventional military campaign represents an unprecedented convergence of pressure on the Iranian state. On the question of who is currently in charge of Iran, the honest and deeply significant answer, as reported from Tel Aviv by correspondent Yingst, is nobody is entirely sure. The killing of Ali Larijani, a senior Iranian official and one of the most influential figures in the regime's power structure, approximately 48 hours before this broadcast, represented the latest in a series of targeted eliminations that have effectively decapitated Iran's established chain of command. The intelligence commander and a senior commander of the Basij, Iran's internal paramilitary and domestic suppression force, have also been killed. No proof of life has been publicly presented by the new supreme leader. Iranian state media reportedly released a statement in the new leader's name, calling for vengeance for Larijani's death, but the authenticity and direct authorship of that statement could not be independently confirmed. Unverified reports, including an account relayed by an Iranian-born commentator, suggested that the new supreme leader may have suffered serious physical injuries, potentially including the loss of a foot, and may be heavily sedated and receiving treatment outside Iran, with some accounts suggesting Moscow as a possible location. These accounts have not been independently verified by Fox News, but they reflect the degree of genuine uncertainty surrounding Iran's command structure at this critical moment. The key players in this unfolding drama span governments, military institutions, and intelligence agencies. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who served as a United States representative from Hawaii's 2nd Congressional District from 2013 to 2021, before her transition to the executive branch under President Trump's second administration, appeared before the Senate Intelligence Committee alongside other senior members of the intelligence community. Her testimony was notable for its directness and its assessment of Iran's current capabilities. Gabbard stated that the intelligence community assesses the Iranian regime as appearing to be intact but largely degraded, with its conventional military power projection capabilities having been largely destroyed, leaving Tehran with what she described as limited options. She acknowledged, however, that even a degraded Iran and its proxy forces continue to pose active threats to United States and allied interests across the Middle East. Her testimony also included the release of the 2026 Annual Threat Assessment, a 34-page document produced by the broader United States intelligence community, which identified China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran as the top adversaries facing the United States. Crucially, the document assessed that the most likely terrorist threat to the American homeland comes not from organized foreign cells but from domestic lone wolf attackers taking inspiration from foreign extremist ideologies and propaganda. It is a finding consistent with assessments dating back to the period following the September 11th attacks, and one that underscores the enduring and evolving nature of the domestic security challenge. Political analysts observing the Senate hearing noted a telling dynamic in the questioning. While senior intelligence officials presented a comprehensive picture of a degraded Iranian regime still capable of inflicting damage, a significant portion of the Democratic senators' questioning focused on the precise legal definition and application of the word imminent in the context of the justification for the strikes on Iran. Critics of the administration's approach have argued that the administration had an obligation to demonstrate an imminent threat before initiating military action. Administration supporters and many military analysts counter that Iran's decades-long stated commitment to the destruction of Israel and the United States, combined with its active pursuit of nuclear weapons capability and its consistent financial and material support for proxy forces attacking American troops and interests, constitutes a persistent and consistent threat that has been building for 47 years, one that reached a new level of urgency over the past 12 years as Iran's nuclear program accelerated. The debate over imminence reflects deeper constitutional questions about the War Powers Resolution of 1973, which requires the President to notify Congress within 48 hours of committing American forces to armed conflict, and limits unauthorized military engagement to 60 days, absent a formal declaration of war. Adding to the complexity of the domestic political dimension is a striking data point raised during the broadcast. Approximately 80% of the intelligence analysts employed by the Department of Homeland Security, the very professionals responsible for analyzing and reporting on threats to the American homeland, are currently not receiving their pay. In the midst of an active multi-front military engagement with a nation that the intelligence community has just formally identified as one of the top 4 adversaries of the United States, the operational capacity of the very analysts tasked with keeping Americans safe has been materially compromised. This is not an abstract policy concern. It is a concrete, immediate operational vulnerability at a moment of maximum strategic risk. On the international front, the response from America's traditional partners has been a mixture of alarm, support, and cautious calibration. NATO allies Estonia and Finland have both issued statements indicating their commitment to stepping up in support of the broader alliance framework. Finland, which shares a lengthy and historically sensitive border with Russia, and which only recently joined NATO in April of 2023, has a naval capability that analysts note could be strategically significant. Ukraine, meanwhile, has been referenced as arguably the single most vocal and committed partner in the current environment, having already experienced firsthand the consequences of allowing a regional aggressor to operate without meaningful military deterrence. The Prince of Saudi Arabia's statement, explicitly threatening to deploy every political, economic, and diplomatic tool available to stop Iran's attacks on Gulf nations, signals that the kingdom, which has long calibrated its relationship with Iran with careful pragmatism, may be approaching a threshold beyond which neutrality is no longer a viable posture. Economically, the implications of what is happening in the Persian Gulf right now cannot be overstated. The 30% spike in European natural gas prices triggered by the strike on the North Field off Qatar represents only the most immediate and visible market reaction. The United States, which became the world's largest exporter of liquefied natural gas after exports were effectively zero as recently as 2016, a transformation that took place in less than a decade and fundamentally altered global energy geopolitics, stands to see significant changes in the dynamics of its LNG export market as a result of these strikes. Oil prices have spiked in response to the broader conflict. The strikes on UAE and Kuwaiti energy infrastructure add additional uncertainty to global supply chains at a moment when energy markets were already navigating significant volatility. For European nations that have been working to diversify their energy supply chains away from Russian gas in the wake of the invasion of Ukraine, the targeting of Qatar's North Field, a cornerstone of that diversification strategy, represents a deeply alarming development. Looking ahead, there are several critical developments to monitor in the coming days and weeks. The Pentagon's news conference, scheduled within hours of this broadcast, is expected to provide the most comprehensive public accounting yet of Operation Epic Fury, including what CENTCOM's newly released video footage reveals about the scope and effectiveness of the military campaign. Analysts and members of Congress on both sides of the aisle will be watching carefully for any indication of what comes next operationally. A request for a supplemental war funding package, reported to include up to $200 billion, is expected to be presented to Congress, and the political battle over that funding will unfold against a backdrop of deep partisan divisions over the administration's handling of the conflict. The Persian New Year Nowruz is imminent, and with it comes a historically significant moment for popular expression inside Iran itself. In past years, including during the most recent Fire Festival celebrations, large numbers of Iranian citizens took to the streets in displays that blurred the line between cultural celebration and political protest, with the regime's internal security apparatus, including the Basij, significantly degraded, and with widespread reports that Israeli and American intelligence sources inside Iran are receiving active cooperation from Iranian citizens who deeply oppose their own government. The question of whether Nowruz celebrations could catalyze a broader internal movement challenging the regime's survival is one that regional analysts are watching with intense interest. Brian Kilmeade of Fox & Friends noted that direct threats are reportedly being issued to Iranian police officers, warning them that they have been placed on a blacklist and will face lethal consequences if they fail to stand down, a reflection of the extraordinary internal pressure the regime is now facing from multiple directions simultaneously. The question of off-ramps, how and whether any party to this conflict finds a path toward de-escalation, remains the most important and most unanswered question of all. A senior Israeli military official told reporter Trey Yinks just days ago that the incoming ballistic missile fire directed at Israel is expected to continue for a period of several more weeks. That assessment, coming from within the Israeli military itself, suggests that even those most directly engaged in this conflict are not anticipating a rapid resolution. President Trump, through his Truth Social posts and the public posture of his administration, has demonstrated a willingness to both restrain and enable Israeli military action depending on the specific circumstances, as seen in his direct intervention to warn against further strikes on Qatar's gas facilities, while simultaneously maintaining the broader operational pressure on Iran. As this extraordinary chapter in American and global history continues to unfold, it is worth pausing to absorb the full weight of what is happening. The United States military is conducting active operations against Iran under a mission designated Operation Epic Fury. 6 American service members, Major John Alec Kilner, Captain Ariana Savino, Ashley Pruitt, Captain Seth Coball, Captain Curtis Angst, and Tyler Simmons, have made the ultimate sacrifice in the course of this mission. Israel is absorbing 7 waves of ballistic missile fire in a single night, with cluster munitions landing in civilian areas and shrapnel falling in the shadow of the world's most ancient and revered holy sites. The global energy infrastructure that heats European homes and powers Asian economies is under direct, sustained attack. Iran's leadership structure has been systematically decapitated to a degree that leaves genuine uncertainty about who, if anyone, is directing Iranian military actions in a coherent and deliberate way. And the United States intelligence community has just issued its annual threat assessment warning that the homeland itself faces ongoing danger from lone wolf attackers inspired by foreign extremists for ideologies, even as the analysts responsible for tracking those threats reportedly are not being paid. What we are witnessing is not simply a bilateral conflict between Israel and Iran. It is a stress test of the entire post-World War II framework of international security, energy stability, and regional order in the Middle East. The decisions made in Washington, Jerusalem, Tehran, Riyadh, Doha, and in the command centers of Operation Epic Fury in the coming days and weeks will determine whether this moment becomes a historical inflection point toward a new regional equilibrium, or whether the escalation ladder continues to climb toward consequences that no responsible leader on any side of this conflict should be willing to accept. We will continue to follow every development of this story as it unfolds. Stay informed, stay engaged, and we will be right back with more.